Happy New Year! Did you have a good 2022? I know I didn't, but maybe you saw some good movies. After all, one good film can make all the difference in the world. To wrap things up, I will be going through the movies I watched in the final month of 2022. The first film I saw being Netflix's new animated take on Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. This one's titled Scrooge, A Christmas Carol, which I'm sure won't lead to any confusion whatsoever. Now I know what you're thinking. Sheesh, another Christmas Carol? Well, that's exactly the kind of energy I had throughout most of this movie. I mostly watched it because my sister said we should, and thought, well, I'm gonna have to watch some version of the Christmas Carol this year, so why not this one? This one is a collaboration between Netflix's own animation department and Timeless Films. I'd first like to say that the animation and character design itself is easily the best thing about the movie. I really love the look of it. It had an overall sort of toony, video game-esque design to it. Like, I know I have seen games that look like this before, but I'm no expert on the matter. This movie makes a lot of the same mistakes as the Robert Zemeckis film, where it's trying so hard to outdo every other adaptation of Christmas Carol that the finished result feels a bit empty. It may be visually beautiful, but it's lacking in the emotional depth that a lot of the other adaptations have. If this was my first Christmas Carol movie, I would be too distracted by the popping visuals to even know what's going on half the time. Scrooge has a dog, which is just there so that kids won't get bored, but also a bit odd as I never took Scrooge as the pet owner type. I mean, if he were to have any animal, it'd probably be a cat, not like a large mastiff. There's songs spread throughout, but none of them good. It's a shame because the performers they got all have really nice voices. They're just completely wasted. It's also worth mentioning that in the future where Scrooge is deceased, all the townsfolk are quite literally dancing on his grave. I know this guy was an asshole, but that seems more in line with how one would celebrate the death of a harsh dictator rather than a grumpy old man. Overall, I wasn't a fan. It's fine enough for me to give it a begrudging meh. There is some good in there, but definitely not enough. The next film I watched was The Big Four. That's right, The Big Four, a Netflix Indonesian action comedy from director Timo Tjahjanto, who is probably most well known for his other action film, The Night Comes for Us. The Big Four is basically if you took a violent action film about a team of assassins and set it in the world of The Three Stooges. The humor in this movie is not subtle. This is an incredibly over-the-top slapstick-filled comedy, and it's surprisingly a lot of fun. I think this film does a good job at setting up the individual role of each team member. You understand these characters right from the start. They're not deep characters, but ones that are fun to hang around, and you'll need that when the movie is 2 hours and 20 minutes long. The action is the standout aspect of this film, but the comedy feels seamlessly woven into it. It never goes too far in either direction, resulting in a film that both action and comedy fans can get something out of. I quite like this movie. It was a fun time, and I would recommend it to most people. I'm giving it a thumbs up. The next movie I watched was quite possibly my most anticipated film of the year, and that being Avatar: The Way of Water. The fact that I was anticipating this movie is a bit odd because I'm not a huge fan of the original. As a kid when I saw it in theaters, I didn't really care for it. I just recently rewatched it, and I definitely liked it a lot more, but it still had a lot of evident problems. Way of Water has the advantage of being a James Cameron sequel, which is promising considering that he's directed some of the greatest sequels of all time. It's also been more than a decade since the original, so I was looking forward to seeing how the CG and mocap technology had improved since then. The start of this movie is fucking rough and shows that they really wrote themselves into a corner with the first film. For the first half hour, I was almost certain that I was going to hate this movie, but as it progressed, it managed to find its footing, and by the end, I genuinely really enjoyed this film. This is one of the most beautiful looking movies I have ever seen. I do not know how James Cameron and his team of ridiculous amounts of animators were able to pull this all off. I saw this in IMAX 3D, and it really felt like I was being transported to an entirely new world, which sounds corny, but it's true. The only problem I had with the visual aspect of this movie were those high frame rate moments, which the film switches back and forth between. It never looks good, and I have no idea why any director would choose to partially ruin a film like that. The story itself, I was also on board with. Not everything works, but there's a running theme of family here that is overdone in Hollywood, but I felt that this is one of the better examples of that. I really felt connected to these characters, but perhaps it was just the long runtime that provided me the chance to really get to know them. I don't believe film should ever just be about the plot. So many people tend to think that way, but there's so many different elements that go into a movie, especially one as big as this. And sometimes the sheer spectacle of it being more effective than the story is perfectly fine. James Cameron directed the hell out of this movie. Is it perfect? No, but it's a movie I very much enjoyed, admired, and would love to watch again. There's just nothing else like it, and I'm gonna give it a thumbs up. See it on the big screen in 3D if you can. And finally, to cap off the year, I saw the highly anticipated Knives Out sequel, Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery. Okay, first off, how fucking bizarre is it that this movie is currently a streaming exclusive with a very limited theatrical run? I mean, the first Knives Out was a huge box office hit. I guess it's just one of those weird phenomena that we'll have to adjust to in this day and age. Glass Onion isn't exactly a sequel to Knives Out, rather than an entirely new mystery that incorporates Daniel Craig's detective character of Benoit Blanc. That concept alone is pretty great, and I am happy to say that I had a blast watching Glass Onion. Much like the first movie, this is not a conventional murder mystery. There's many twists and turns along the way. Often the mystery shifts focus onto an entirely new mystery. I think that's why so many people on the internet seem unsatisfied with this film, because it is so unconventional. But I also think that's a big part of the appeal of Rian Johnson movies. There's really nothing else quite like them. The movie pokes a lot of fun at rich asshole culture and how so much of their success relies on having connections to one another. I would say the douchey personality of Edward Norton's Elon Musk-esque character is extremely relevant, but Elon Musk has always been like that. And I am fully aware it's not just Elon Musk, it's a variety of rich assholes that he's portraying. I do think it is easy to see why the first film is more of a crowd pleaser. I do think it has a better structure overall. But I personally really enjoy Glass Onion, and I look forward to seeing the next Benoit Blanc mystery, assuming we'll be getting another one someday. It's a thumbs up from me. And that concludes my monthly recaps for 2022. This is also the last monthly recap video probably ever. I made a goal to get through at least 1 year of these, and I have, surprisingly enough, achieved that goal. Despite this being my final monthly recap, I am still hard at work on concluding my 4Kids Ninja Turtles recap, and I have a lot of other videos planned for the future, so stay tuned for more. 2022 was an excellent year for film. I think it's one of the best in a very long time, and I'm glad to have been able to share my thoughts with you. Thank you for all of your support, and have a happy new year. Goodbye.